is the majority leader of the Senate in Virginia from James City County, Tommy Norment, newly installed as the official Senate leader in Virginia after his victory in November. Senator Norment, great to have you with us, man.
Good morning, John. It's great to be with you. I'm not in Java Joe's, but I can tell you there's a lot going on in Richmond right now, my friend.
Well, there certainly is, and we're in Richmond today as well. Senator, I want to get, we've been covering the Supreme Court justice battle here for a good part of the day. I went to the hearings yesterday where we had a chance to talk a little bit. Certainly Judge Roush qualified. But look, she's not going to get approval in the House of Delegates, okay? It just isn't going to happen. She's going to lose 60 to something, 62-38. So now her nomination never even gets to the Senate. You guys have got another candidate, Judge Rossi Alston. Had a chance to talk to him yesterday. As like Justice Roush, this guy's supremely qualified. Judge Roush is not going to be on the table when his vote comes up in the Senate. Why would you not vote for Rossi Alston? How does this make sense?
Well, regretfully, like a lot of things in government, there's a certain protocol that has to be followed, John, and it sometimes is a little cumbersome. As a matter of fact, I wish I had my good friend Heather Cordasco up here to grab a few people for me. It would help, but you're taking her off to Iowa. The way this works is that under Virginia's Constitution, the General Assembly has the constitutional responsibility to elect judges. There are those who don't like that system, and I understand that. But that is the system in Virginia, and it has not changed. If the General Assembly does not elect a judge, then a judge for the Supreme Court, for instance, then defaults to the governor. The governor has the ability to make an interim appointment for the Supreme Court judge if the General Assembly abdicates its responsibility to elect a judge. The important thing is that term of a gubernatorial appointment, including Judge Rouse, only lasts until 30 days after the General Assembly comes into session. So on February the 12th of 2016, Judge Rouse will no longer be on the Supreme Court of Virginia by an operation of our Constitution. So what is now happening is that the House of Delegates has moved forward and has interviewed Judge Rouse and Judge Alston. It has voted in the Courts Committee that both of those judges are supremely qualified to be on the Supreme Court of Virginia. Actually, I sat through the interviews yesterday, and I was pleased that they were very civil, and I thought Judge Rouse did well. I thought that Judge Alston did extremely well, particularly considering how viciously he had been attacked by the Democrats the last time that he was interviewed. So the House is moving forward today to have an election on who they would like to be the General Assembly's elected judge as contrasted with the governor's. And once the House of Delegates does that, they will send a resolution over to the Senate of Virginia asking that we act on it. So the Senate is waiting for the House to send us a resolution and to see what their nomination is. And while it's a cumbersome process, it is the constitutional process, and it's important to remember that it is the primary responsibility and the prerogative of the legislative branch in Virginia to determine who will be on the Supreme Court for a 12-year term.
So the House expected today to, and by the way, I agree with you. I thought the hearings were very respectful and civil with both justices. So Let's just play this out. Senator Tommy Norment, Majority Leader of Virginia Senate Republican. Let's just play this out. So the House is going to vote on Justice Roush. She's not going to pass. The House is then going to turn around and vote on Judge Rossi Alston, who, by the way, is African-American, very qualified. No argument that either of these candidates are supremely qualified. Judge Alston is going to pass easily. So then that nomination from the House, right, goes to the Senate. The Senate's not going to vote on Judge Roush, Justice Roush, because she's already been defeated in the House. So that's the end of that.
Well, what's important about that, John, and excuse me for interrupting you, is
sure.
It is the rule of the General Assembly that once a judge has been voted on during a session of the General Assembly, if that judge is not successfully elected, then he or she cannot be reconsidered or elected as a judge in that session of the General Assembly.
Right. So if she is unsuccessful to gain 50% plus one in the House of Delegates this afternoon, her nomination never gets to your side of the chamber, right?
That is correct.
So there's no vote on Judge Roush because she's no longer a candidate to be considered for Supreme Court justice. Then the House turns around and they nominate Judge Alston. Judge Alston carries a majority in the House. Then it goes to your chamber. Now you've got 21 Republican members. No one that I've talked to on either side of the aisle has brought Judge Alston's qualifications into question. None. Not one. So now your judge goes to your chamber, of which you lead, of which you have a majority, and we're told that he's not, as of now, we're told that he's likely not going to get the 21 votes he needs to be confirmed because one of your newly elected senators, Glenn Sturdivant, who, by the way, you recruited, who, by the way, your caucus put $500,000 in, who, by the way, you raised $2 million to get him elected. Now we find out that he's going to oppose the nomination of Judge Alston because he was unhappy with some procedural thing. Well, Senator, when I had him on my show 3 times, when he was a candidate for state Senate, I asked him 3 separate times if he would support Judge Alston, and he gave me no indication, nor my listeners, that he would oppose this nomination. Yet we're told today that right out of the box, you've got one of your senators who you guys worked your tail off to get in there, who is basically going to abandon the caucus and oppose Judge Alston based on a procedural issue. I mean, what the hell is going on with this?
Well, it's a little more complicated than that, John. And let me say, first of all, we worked very hard for a number of candidates this last November to hold the majority in the Senate of Virginia. Blessedly, we were successful because, frankly, I believe Virginia as a Commonwealth is better led by a Republican majority in the Senate. Glenn Sturdivant is a young gentleman of great conscience and great principle, and I did not hear the interviews on your show, and for that I apologize. I've talked with Senator Sturdivant on a number of occasions. He does favor Judge Roush, and that is an individual decision that he can make. However, if Judge Roush does not receive a majority of votes in the House of Delegates and is thereby ineligible to even be considered by the Senate, then I am hopeful that Senator Sturdivant will look at the process and recognize that while Judge Roush may have been his preference, that she is not going to be elected to the Supreme Court, that the House of Delegates is resolved in that because Judge Alston is their preference, which is their legislative prerogative, and that we have a responsibility to fill the vacancies on the Supreme Court. We have a 7-member Virginia Supreme Court. If we do not elect a judge to the Supreme Court, we will have 6 justices sitting on the Supreme Court. And you have the possibility, a very real possibility, of coming down with some 3-3 decisions, which creates an impasse and something of a crisis on the Virginia Supreme Court. So what I am hopeful is that Senator Sturtevant will have expressed his preference, will have taken a position on that, but recognizes that now the General Assembly is in a very different posture, and if we do not act and we do not elect a judge other than the disqualified Judge Rouse, then we're creating a problem. And the Supreme Court has already had some challenges on this. Judge Rouse has been sitting on an interim basis until her appointment expires on February the 13th. But as she testified yesterday, and you were there, all of the opinions that she has written since she has been sitting as an interim Supreme Court justice have been unanimous decisions, 7-0. So the constitutionality of her appointment has really not come into play. So I am hoping that Senator Sturtevant will feel like he has been true to his principles, but that also he will recognize that we as the General Assembly have a constitutional responsibility to elect judges. And let me just hasten to add that I do not see, if in fact Judge Rouse does not receive a majority of votes today in the House of Delegates, I do not see any circumstances whatsoever that the House of Delegates would ever elect her to the Supreme Court. And I think that the House of Delegates would go so far as to not even adjourn so that the governor would not have the option to reappoint her to the Supreme Court for another interim term. So this is very serious business, not just to the legislative branch, not just to the executive branch and the governor, but to the Supreme Court of Virginia. And candidly, I wish that the governor would have a little more dialogue and be reasonable on it. I am afraid that he sees this much more as a political chess game, and it's boiling down to whether he wins or he loses, and that is a terrible situation to put the judiciary in, especially when our Constitution is clear. It is the legislative's prerogative and constitutional responsibility to elect judges.
I really understand the independence of thought that Senator Sturtevant has regarding Justice Roush, that he believes she's qualified and should be win an appointment by the General Assembly. So I really understand that. I mean, that is his prerogative. And so, but she's not going to come up in the chamber as a candidate. So if it was like vote for her or vote for the other guy and he voted for her and that broke the tie, I understand that. But now what we're talking about, she doesn't even come up. So now the consideration is for Judge Rossi Alston. That's all that's being considered in the Senate today, most likely. So now you're talking about one of your caucus members voting in opposition of Alston to deny him the Supreme Court justice appointment by the General Assembly, and deny him that based on what? He's certainly qualified. Look, I can see where the Democrats are coming from. I talked to a lot of them last night, and what they're saying is, look, we don't like the way this whole thing went down. We don't like what the House did, blah, blah, blah. So we're just going to vote no. Okay, I get that, all right? It's a partisan thing. But you have a Republican member who is going to vote to oppose a qualified African-American justice, Supreme Court justice nominee, and stagnate the system. I don't see how this sense, and I don't think this has got anything to do with principle, because the principle would have been vote for the other, vote for Judge Roush. I get that, but now the principle is I'm going to stop Rossi Alston from serving on the Supreme Court of Virginia because what? I want to make a procedural point. I just, I don't think this plays well, and I think it doesn't look good for Virginia, and I don't really get Sturtevant's thinking.
Well, it does not look good for Virginia, and unfortunately, there are a lot of dynamics about it. I found it very unusual, if you will. The last time around, where the Democratic caucus in the Senate locked down and refused to support Judge Alston, and I say that because when he was interviewed the last time, John, the House Democrats, led by a minority delegate, were brutal. Brutal in their questioning of him. They were questioning Judge Alston, was he a man of faith? And he said yes. And then they started attacking him that his faith was going to interfere with his ability to make impartial decisions based on the law. Yesterday, as you heard, was much more civil. But what was shocking to me is that Virginia has the opportunity to take a highly qualified judge who has been, unlike Judge Roush, who has been a trial judge at several levels, who has been an experienced appellate judge, who has been voted on and approved by the entire General Assembly, Republicans and alike, on multiple times, has been elected to a judgeship, and suddenly they think he's not qualified. Virginia could make history. We would be the first state in the union to have three minority judges sitting on its Supreme Court, and individuals are blocking him, frankly, for political reasons.
Unbelievable. We want to thank Senator Majority Leader Tommy Norment for being with us, and I'm sure, Senator, you've got to be very disappointed in how this is playing out based on all you've done.